Good evening, and once again, welcome to another edition of the Shadow Gallery. I am, as always, your host, James Donnelly, and it's Monday night, so it must mean that it's time for new comics, bitches! So, yes, I was going to start basically just with the reviews because there was really no other real significant news to talk of this week until they just now premiered the teaser trailer for Thor: The Dark World. If you have not seen this yet, go and watch it. I will wait. You can pause me and find it on, go to the trailer section on on iTunes and get it because it looks kind of like how we wanted the first film to be. That there would be more happening. I know, but anyway, that would be more happening basically up on Asgard or in the other nine realms, in the other areas of the nine realms other than just Asgard and Earth and Jotunheim. The Dark Elf and everything. I mean, just, it looks like, because the director of the film, Alan Taylor, obviously has a pretty fine pedigree coming from Game of Thrones, and this looks like it's kind of almost a Marvel Comics version of Game of Thrones, which, to me, is pretty fucking awesome. Especially if you take into account last night's episode of Game of Thrones. If you saw it, wow. Easily one of the best episodes of that show. But, yeah, like I said, just pause this for 90 seconds and watch that trailer, because it is fucking incredible. It's a really good teaser. To get yourself set up, and of course the ending is the best part, even though I have to wonder a little bit about the hair. When you see it, you'll know what I'm talking about. But anyway, let's actually dive into the comics here. I am toying with kind of like what I did last week in segmenting my reviews by publisher. By doing the big two and then doing the independents. But frankly, because that was kind of the format change that I was hinting at, that might come into play on certain weeks when there are a lot of big issues that come out, like the Batman week, which is usually big, because there are three titles alone that week that I always spend a lot of time talking about, and who knows where it's going to go from here. But anyway, let's start with this week's offerings to the comics gods. And as usual, we will start with Marvel. And there are three picks of the week, two excellent pulps, and one just very awesome book, and we'll talk about those in a bit. So let's start off with Superior Spider-Man number 8. Yes, the comic that you all love for me to review because so few of you actually read it. And you know who you are. So, but you know what? Forget the haters. I'm pressing on with this book. And the reason that I'm pressing on is because of issues like this. Because we have Octo-Spidey versus the Avengers, at least for a little while. We have Carly soon be closing in on the truth, and has kind of a mysterious helper along with her as she's, obviously looking over some bits and pieces of what's been going on lately with Spider-Man, and just such a kind of a radical shift in his personality, his demeanor, and the fight with the Avengers, against Cap and Thor and Black Widow and Spider-Woman and Wolverine, Ends, of course, with Spidey getting kind of thrashed. And, of course, Ghost Spidey is there the whole way. And he is trying to exert more influence, and it almost works, but not really. Because the whole purpose of this submitting to the tests was not to find out if he is someone else, because, as it turns out, of course, who else could it be? Because none of the scientifically minded Avengers are there. There's no Iron Man, there's no Hank Pym, everybody else is elsewhere. So we've got kind of the most basic thinkers, the more strategic thinkers of, and then you have Thor and Wolverine, who are just kind of the heavy hitters. But basically what the scan is all to prove that basically he is not a Skrull, and that he's not under any kind of mind control by the Purple Man or by the Controller or ad nauseum, the mind manipulators of the Marvel U. So that seemed a little anticlimactic, but he's on probation, or maybe even double secret probation, who knows. But Black Widow offers some words of advice that are, some of which are stolen directly from the Avengers film, as when she does mention the fact that she has red in her ledger. And basically she's chalking his whole kind of shift from going back to Ends of the Earth, where this does play into two areas of this book. One here, where Widow believes that the reason that he's acting so strangely is because of Silver Sable and her death. And she thinks that he believes, that his responsibility for that, and, it's how he can basically just do whatever he needs to do to kind of erase that red from his ledger, such as the killing of Massacre. But he does notice something, an anomaly in the scan, and Peter, again, trying to exert some influence over Spidey's body, his own body, I should say, and he actually does try and draw a picture of an octopus pointing at his spider logo, or his spider mask, I should say. And Black Widow looks at it and just says, wow, he draws, for someone who calls himself Spider-Man, he draws a really bad picture of a spider. So she thinks that it's a spider and not an octopus. So kind of fun there. Basically, then we have, Spidey is all trying to get up in Cardiac's face because he stole one of his, Octo Spidey, or Otto's creations. And basically Ghost Peter really trying to break through, and what we see here is that Otto basically sees the underground lab that Cardiac has created, and he sees his helmet, and is on that little girl, and he wants to help her because of she is actually a casualty of what he did in the kind of global warming heat up that he did during Ends of the Earth. So this is his chance to right one of his wrongs. And of course, since it is actually him in there, he can fix the helmet that apparently is not working properly, to fix the brain damage that this little girl suffered because of what Otto did when he was still Doc Ock. But this helmet, this little brain fixer-upper helmet, also reveals that there is indeed someone else inside his skull. And so he actually hears Peter speaking kind of to him and then answers Peter. And Ghost Peter is not in a good place right now, because basically what Otto is looking to do now, even though he has just done this very heroic thing, and the heroism feels good, he feels that it's time for a Parker-ectomy. And, I have to hand it to Slott. He is really good at working the suspense angle here. He's good at getting you to come back to this title, because I think that he knows that the odds are kind of stacked against him. So, for the most part, he is getting you to come back, even when, like I said, one of the worst issues of Marvel in recent memory was, I think, Superior number 4, number 3, whichever one that was the first kind of reappearance of Massacre. I think it was number 3. I think it was number 4. And I just thought it was abysmal. I hated it. And Slott writes Otto's voice brilliantly. He does an excellent job with that. Overall, in Humberto Ramos doing really some terrific work on art here. His fight scenes are really dynamic. He does do a really good job of making Superior Spidey look a little creepier, a little darker than he would with just Spidey. Having these having almost, having these, the change in the eyelets have made this, it makes him look darker, like you can almost see the, the eyes kind of like they're, like they're almost, pupils, and they'll sometimes dilate and they'll close, and you see kind of that, some of the darkness of that kind of reaching through. It's a nice visual cue for the design of this outfit, but Ramos is really the first guy, I think, to kind of really work with that, and I think it's a good place to go. Overall, this is a well-written, very well-drawn, and exciting issue. There's some really interesting things happening here, so I have to give this a 4 out of 5 for Superior Spider-Man number 8. It's a good title, and I think that some of you who are the naysayers out there about this book might turn around a little bit on this one eventually. I think some of you might see the light. Or some of you are just so kind of dead set against it that there's nothing that will change your mind. And that's understandable as well. But anyway, moving along. Daredevil End of Days, number 7. Now, basically we have here Ben, of course, still trying to put it all together. Who is Mapone? What does this mean? And he gets a clue from Melvin Potter, who calls him and says, that because there is a new Daredevil in town, it is definitely not Matt Murdock, and he has people that have made specific requests for the Daredevil costume, and he has an address which there are apparently there are like 4 or 5 different names that this address tried to have these costumes of Daredevil sent over to, and part of this leads to Ben going to the Church of the Hand. So basically the Hand is now appreciating the religious freedom that it couldn't as a criminal, death-worshipping organization, and Ben goes to talk to one of the guys in charge of the church, and of course he is a ninja, and he wants to really know what's in Ben's brain. So so this ninja guy basically puts Ben under psychic assault, and Ben is fighting with all of his might to stop it. He does fare pretty well here. But, again, it's that trigger word of Mapone. It means something to a lot of different people. What it is, we don't know. And this guy this ninja wants to know more about Stick, because he feels that, the resurrection techniques that Stick was taught may be responsible for this other Daredevil. That maybe it is indeed Matt Murdock, but just a resurrected Matt Murdock. Now he finds an apartment. He goes to the apartment that Melvin talked about, and he goes in there, and it is just filled with all these clues that seem to indicate that this apartment belonged to Bullseye. It is very, very creepy. There is even a blow-up fuck doll dressed up like Elektra. And that was that moment was just so uber creepy that it was just like, oh my god, I can't believe that, Jansen and Sienkiewicz just drew this. Now, unfortunately, in this issue, we don't have some of the big splash pages by, Mack or by Sienkiewicz. It's just Klaus Janson banging away with the grittiness and Sienkiewicz doing inks. And basically, he's in this apartment, he's trying to look for different clues, and Ben seems to find something that really surprises him, but as the panels that surround Ben start to close in, you start to see hand ninjas creeping around him, and then poof, in comes Daredevil. And he starts to fight them all out and basically takes Ben outside and onto this rooftop where they are under massive assault, epic assault by hand ninjas. But who else comes to save the day but the Punisher, because Frank Castle is out and about and he is ready to get back to work. And he's loving the fact that the ninjas are out there, man, because he's just blowing them all to hell. And of course, Daredevil is helping out as well and trying to keep Ben safe. But that doesn't quite work out. And it is finally revealed who the new Daredevil is. So not only does Ben kind of get an arrow to the gut in this assault, but he also gets a kind of proverbial kick to the balls as the identity of the new Daredevil is finally revealed. And so we're just like, you're just left with, and there's one issue to go. So, I mean, this mystery that Bendis and Mack are leading Ben Urich down has to wrap up in the next issue. So, I mean, this being the penultimate issue, they really did pull out a lot of the stops here. I mean, crafting one hell of a book. I mean, there's, Ben just has some great character beats. The opening it literally, I was reading a review on CBR today, and I agreed with a lot of what they said, but what they also kind of pointed out is that almost every character in the Daredevil universe that is alive is kind of given a little bit of face time. We even may get a little bit of Maggie in the opening, because Ben is actually sitting in a church, and he's just kind of thinking about everything that's going on. And I think that the nun that we're seeing here is Maggie, because she takes a picture and kisses it and puts it back down. We see that it's a framed photo of Matt. But, the beats for, Frank Castle, the new Daredevil, the epic ninja battle, just a gritty, awesome art from Jansen and Sienkiewicz. Just one hell of a climax here. I mean, this is just like, it's, obviously we know that this is set in the future, and this is a, it's a alternate universe tale, if you will. Perhaps. I doubt that this is the direction that anybody plans to take Matt Murdock in, but this is, again, more of a continuation of when Bendis was on the title. When, before Wade obviously took over. I mean, this is, kind of following the same kind of lines of logic as, from Miller to then, Senti and Chichester and now, Bendis, Brubaker, Diggle. That's where all of this is coming from. This is nothing to do with Waid's run at all. So it's basically just Bendis kind of taking this character that he helped to kind of not reinvigorate, but of course, that's, Daredevil, under Bendis's command was a very formidable book. And it was a terrific book. I still think that Brubaker actually had the better arcs going on. But, obviously, kind of the whole kind of Kingpin, arc, where Daredevil himself becomes Kingpin and everything like that. All the nonsense kind of before Shadowland crept up, which was just kind of garbage in my opinion. But anyway, really, really strong issue. Very solid 4.5 out of 5. Very dense. I mean, it's that's the one thing that you can always count on with this miniseries is that, or maxi series. It's only 8 issues, so it's not quite a maxi series, but not quite a miniseries. And every issue is very dense, and you really get your money's worth for the writing and the art. This has been a terrific series, and I can't wait to get it in trade. So moving away from Marvel, we're going to Valiant, and we're going to talk about Bloodshot number 10. So basically, Bloodshot and Kara take the child Psyops that they had saved in the previous issue, and they're looking to take them to, well, nobody is quite sure where except for Bloodshot. He does have a safe house that he has kind of set up for, a couple people, or maybe just himself, but, now he's got a lot of mouths to feed. But they do encounter some, unfortunately, very heavy resistance along the way. And these are not agents of PRS. They are actually just independent, kind of, almost, these kind of black ops, these private black ops organizations, names of all of which, for some reason, seem to escape me right now. Blackwater, is that one of them? Something like that. I don't know. I can't remember. But you know who I'm talking about. Like the contractors that the U.S. was using during the Iraq War and the Afghan War that are still going on, of course. Anyway, and some of the children are able to help counter this resistance, but there's one child who is trying to stop the violence, trying to stop this bloodshed. And each of the children have their own way of attacking, whether it's through some kind of psychic manifestation or some kind of psychic control. And, but the one child who is reading kind of all the thoughts of these men who have come out here to do this job, she sees that they're just doing a job. And they, just signed up for the money and the benefits. They didn't know that this was going to be their fate, that all of them were going to die. And she tries to stop that, but, Bloodshot basically tells the little girl, it's either us or them. And I'd rather it's us. So they do finally get across the desert and finally get to this safe house. And we have, Bloodshot kind of reaching an emotional epiphany of sorts, because there is there's some questions of trust that Kara has because of what happened to Melissa, aka Pulse, that she basically died for Bloodshot to realize what his real purpose is, and not just to learn who he is, but he discusses how he believes very strongly that even though these may be implanted memories, these memories of his family, that he does have a family, and that's the only thing that drives him. And the loss of, and Melissa was part of that family in a way. And her loss is very it's very taxing on him, much more taxing than she would have originally thought, that Kara would have originally thought, and maybe even he would have originally thought. So he has, in a big way, very much a surrogate family here, that he's adopted these children to keep them safe from PRS and keep them out of the reach of whoever looks to, abscond with them. And of course, at this point, it seems to be Karedich and Harada. And basically, that's, they're continuing their scheming, and of course, there is ultimately an intervention by Harada to try and to try and get the Psyops back, and Bloodshot just ain't having any. Now, of course, this is all tying into Harbinger Wars, because you have, Bloodshot and Harbinger very much tying together right now, even though, of course, you still have, all of these books from Valiant are all set in this same universe where PRS exists. That is obviously, it's bled into Exo MANOWAR, it's bled into, it's bleeding into Archer and Armstrong in a big way right now, but, I have no idea about Shadow Man because I just didn't like the first issue, and I'm not reading it. So this will still continue in Harbinger Wars. But it's just a really nice change of pace to have. I mean, there is obviously some huge action that goes on in this issue, and it's really awesome, but there's some really nice, quiet character moments that Bloodshot has, and Kara, and I love how Straczynski is really giving a very individual voice and very individual presence to all of these children. And he writes Harada very well. He definitely has his voice down. And the only kind of downside to this issue, first of all, it felt really short. It felt kind of abbreviated, but that this is going to be continued in Harbinger Wars, which is a much larger scale event. So I can understand that. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I still do understand it. And that's the art of Barry Kitson. Now, Barry Kitson was somebody that I was introduced to on the very short-lived Matt Fraction Marvel series, The Order, which came out of, it was birthed out of Civil War and the Initiative and everything like that. And that was a really terrific book. I loved The Order. And Barry Kitson's art on it was fantastic. I loved it. But he has the normal series artist, Stefano Gaudino, doing inks on part of this issue. And then on other parts, it's just Kitson, where Kitson, he has some flashback moments, and then we have some present moments, and the art is, the inking is much cleaner, it's much more well-defined, it's not nearly as dark. But then you have the Gaudino inks on Kitson's art, and it looks pretty much like Gaudino's art. It's very, it's very ink heavy, it's very shaded, and these artistic choices that they make for, visually in this book, sometimes it kind of helps, and sometimes it kind of hurts. So it's like I appreciate the flashback moments, but there are some kind of abrupt changes in art styles. That's all part of the inking. So, but still, Bloodshot continues to be a continually interesting, action-packed, really hardcore read for Valiant, and continues to be just a terrific comic title. And this was a very solid 4 out of 5 for Bloodshot number 10. Exo MANOWAR number 12. We have Planet Death continuing, as Eric basically getting a little bit of a crash course in Vine's exchange program, if you will, as he sees the other Visigoths that are all still alive. And one of, this beautiful redheaded woman is actually wearing a kind of a cloak that has Eric's uncle's insignia on it, and so he believes it to be Deirdre, his wife. And of course, he grabs her, and it's not. And he asks, where did you get this? And the priest that is with him, who's trying to kind of contain his fury, if you will, is that everybody that was taken is, for the most part, is still alive and still working on Loam, on the home planet of the Vine. So this gives him some hope that maybe he will find his wife and his uncle, and lead them back all to safety and back to Earth. But Eric knows that he's just not going to give up without a fight, and so again, even against the insistence of the priest to not escalate things further, he still wants to escalate things further. So he goes out on another kind of attack run. And unfortunately for this time, he is outmatched, because he is encountered by these kind of huge mechs that are that grab him, and they're almost like suicide soldiers, because a huge bombardment starts coming at Eric and Shanshara, and he's almost, he's just blown up. I mean, not blown up, but I mean, he gets really badly hurt in this barrage. And fortunately, a soldier who is loyal to the priests finds Eric and actually sees the separation of the MANOWAR armor from Eric. And it kind of goes back to, not quite to the temple, but to like the council chambers. And they're doing some tests on it. Eric wakes up, and of course there's the redheaded woman, who's looking kind of delicious. Maybe even to him. Certainly was to me. I have a thing for redheads, you should know that. Christina Hendricks was on The Daily Show tonight, and I was just like, anyway, so, like any good war story, there are certain beats that need to be included when you have this, when you have kind of like these battle sequences. And that's essentially what this is. This is war that Eric has declared on all of the Vine. And so you have, like, for instance, in the last issue, you have kind of this opening melee in which, the side that we're kind of rooting for is winning. And then you have kind of this inflated sense of almost invincibility, because, since we got through this, we can do anything. But then comes kind of the next beat on top of that, which is the kind of fall of the hero, at least a loss that has everybody questioning, that has our protagonist questioning, okay, well, what is going to happen next? We have, and basically the loss here isn't of a person, but of the armor. Is that basically, the Vine has decided that basically it is time to eliminate all the Visigoths, all their slave labor that they've gotten from Earth. And that's, like I said, the exchange program is that, they left their, newborns, disguised as human children. And of course, we have obviously seen this before with Alexander Dorian. And how the Vine has planted spies throughout, the whole of, of Earth, and they bring back these humans to basically be their slave labor. Now, these beats that I've just discussed, as far as the war stories are concerned, there's something that Vendetti is following very closely, and the book is pretty well suited for it, because this is a book about a warrior. It's about someone who really only knows war and combat. I mean, he knows love, and he doesn't know sacrifice. We're not really sure that he is not just kind of seeking, obviously he's just seeking revenge at this point in time. There's no real indication that Eric is a hero, per se. But we know that he's at least fighting on the right side. So, obviously, he falls very much into the anti-hero category, much like Bloodshot does. But Bloodshot, it has more clear definition now of becoming a hero, where Eric is still kind of, he's not quite even towing that line yet. The book, though, this particular issue seems very slow in parts. There's a lot of expository dialogue. There's a lot of, kind of this and that and the other thing happening, and none of it is terribly interesting, some of these parts, and that really does, unfortunately, kind of take the wind out of the narrative here, even though we have, this big, setup for what's happening next, which is that Eric, without the armor, is going to have to fight. And that's where this is eventually leading us. So, apart from, again, Vendetti hitting the right notes, still making a compelling read. The art in it is, again, really, really well done. But it's a solid 3.5 out of 5. This is certainly not its best issue. But again, like pretty much all of the issues of X-O Manowar, it's certainly not a bad issue. So, that brings us to DC. And I decided to check out Red Hood and the Outlaws, number 19, because James Tynion started writing this book, and I haven't picked this book up since the first issue, so I have literally no idea what's going on right now. But regardless, I was kind of captivated by this book. Basically, we have Jason. He decides to go it alone in the Himalayas, basically to get back to this group of monks called the All Caste, and they are this kind of hidden society in the Himalayas that may or may not have, at least again, my understanding of it is vague at best, but they appear to be the people that trained Jason probably either after his time as the kind of bad Red Hood, the more kind of willing to, I'm going to kill you all Red Hood type of thing, or just maybe after his kind of resurrection at the hands of Ra's al Ghul. So, one way or the other was definitely after he brought back to life. Now, Roy and Coriander are basically trying to find him and to help him, because he seems to have gone to a very dark place because of, very much leading out of what's been going on with, the whole, again, Batman Joker, death of the family story arc. And basically, we get the feeling that Roy really cares about Jason and wants to help him. And there are these strange mystical beings, of course, all over the place, because this is the Himalayas. We have these, secret societies of monks, and how they're constantly at war with, there's evil monks and there's good monks, and and where Jason is going is kind of the good monk area, I'm assuming. But even that seems to be kind of up for grabs. Basically, through Roy and Corey finally get into this otherworldly area of the all cast, and they're beset upon by these huge monsters, and who else comes to save the day but Jason? But the problem is that Jason doesn't know who Roy and Corey are anymore. He seems to be kind of a tabula rasa. And as we find out later in the book, he goes to kind of the leader of the all cast and basically begs this being, if you will, to basically remove the darkness that keeps eating away at his soul, because he just can't seem to control it anymore. So this guy says, the leader of the all cast basically just says, well, if you want it gone, I will take it all. And that's basically where we end, which is where we see that, yes, Jason is kind of reborn. And whether or not it will be for good or ill, time will tell. But this apparently is supposed to take place after Batman and Robin, aka Batman and Red Hood number 20. So it's a little confusing as to why we're seeing this issue now, but I think that Tynion just wanted to make a connection that will lead into the events, perhaps, of Batman and Red Hood number 20. So this book is a little bit problematic art-wise. Julius Gopez, who is the artist here, his art ranges between... It alternates between really kind of eye-poppingly great and really kind of sucky. It's really bizarre to see. I mean, it's like it has some of these moments of like Neil Adams-ish kind of just awesomeness, and then it just all of a sudden looks terrible, and I don't know why. It seems to... I mean, the artist doesn't change, the inks don't change, I mean, it's like this is a guy who's still trying to find his style or something like that, and it's like the more he tries on like the Neil Adams-y kind of stuff, it looks great, and the more he maybe tries to play around with that, it starts to look terrible. Like the faces almost look deformed and stuff like that. It just in the areas where it's good, it's really good. In the areas which is bad, it is kind of really bad. But the book seems to want to go into much more interesting places than this book could ever have indicated from its first issue. And the really captivating thing here about this issue is the internal struggle of Roy. Because, he sees himself... Because there is a journey into his subconscious that is caused by one of these, ethereal beings that seems to want to assault his psyche and kind of tell him, yes, you are the weak link, and that you always will be. You're going to be a loser. You're going to be the junkie. You're going to be, you're always going to be, just again the bad chain that will eventually undo everything. And we see how Tynion shows him fighting back and fighting his own subconscious, but even if it's been invaded, there is shreds of his own subconscious in there, and that's a particularly striking moment in this book. So, and Tynion he seems to be writing these characters very assuredly, particularly Roy and Corey, because we don't see much of Jason in this issue. We do see him at the end and a little bit at the beginning, and there's again some interesting stuff that's happening here, but just really more for Roy and Corey, especially Roy. He really seems to be kind of the main focus right now. At least for Tynion, and whether or not that continues, I couldn't say. But for right now, I might continue to pick this one up, because this was, like I said, aside from the art, there's some pretty compelling stuff going on here. So this was, I say, because of the good stuff, and the solid writing and the solid character work, you know, I have, the bad art definitely does take this book down a notch or so, but I would give it a 3.5 out of 5 for Red Hood and the Outlaws number 19. So it's very interesting to me. Wonder Woman number 19. Now this, of course, the fold-out cover, the kind of the rage and the passion. It's like, ooh, Superman might get a little pissed off here. But this is very much Wonder Woman's book. She is not, there's no Justice League here. There's no anybody else. There's her and what Azzarello wants to deal with in this book, which is the Greek gods. And the gods must be crazy, particularly Orion. And I'll talk about that in a few moments. Now, basically, with the retrieval of Zola's baby from Hermes, basically those aligned with Diana, particularly War and Hera and Zola and Orion and Lennox all seem to be made a stronger unit, even though Lennox basically tries to explain that it's time for him to leave. It's time for him to take his leave of them. In the meantime, we have the Firstborn and Cassandra, who I thought had died in the previous issue because it was unclear as to what exactly happened there, but was swallowed up by Poseidon in his big, whale mouth. And Firstborn basically looks at killing Poseidon, but the reason he can't is because if he kills Poseidon, this manifestation of him that he's within will die along with him, so it will take basically them both down to hell. But Poseidon basically lets him know that there is this new player on the board that the Firstborn was never aware of, and that, of course, is Zola's baby. And because it is, again, this, this prophecy that the last-born of Zeus will kill the ruler of Olympus, who at this point is actually Apollo, and basically we have, this is almost starting to turn into almost a political struggle of sorts. And Poseidon is almost in a paternal fashion trying to teach the Firstborn about what exactly he needs to do, and he needs to actually almost combine his strength with that of the last-born, even though it's just an infant. Now, however long that can possibly last for, we don't quite know yet, but that leads to some very compelling stuff here. And, of course, this alliance that Diana has formed may very well be the demise because of who she has decided to align herself with. War is considered to be by Apollo and Dionysus and Moon. I can't remember which goddess that's actually supposed to be. I don't know if that's supposed to be Athena. But I'm not sure. But anyway, there's just and then you have as above, so below in regards to Hades and Poseidon are also doing their dealings, and they're basically looking to have, no matter what, they're still looking to have the the last-born excised from the picture. They're looking, the last-born is too much of a wild card and has to be removed from the playing table. And which is kind of where we leave off. Now, it's just a beautifully drawn, Tony Akins and another artist, I forgot to write his name down, I can't remember, but does a terrific job on art again here. The pages look lovely, all the characters look great, it's just so vividly drawn, and the rapport, and the voices of each character is very singular. Azzarello is a very, very talented writer, as we know, but to really get the characters' voices of each of the gods and everything like that, it's all kind of, it could just be like, well, we'll all speak kind of old-timey, but no, I mean, he definitely has, each character has a voice and a personality and a point of view, and it's great to see, an ensemble of characters work so nicely with, within the confines of just one issue, because this is all over the place. I mean, everybody's here. And, you have this, you still have this kind of almost, the animosity between Zola and Hera, and that's kind of abating as well. So, I mean, again, it's just, everybody around Diana seems to be better for being around Diana, because that's just who she is. But then, of course, there is we were getting to this eventually, the kind of pseudo-romantic, punishing kind of moment between, that is teased, of course, on the cover, between Diana and Orion. Basically, Diana seems to be quite fed up with Orion's constant innuendos. He's actually applauding Lennox leaving, because even though she's technically, Lennox is technically his brother, it's just one less guy around for Orion. He's liking what he's seeing when he's looking at Diana. And you do have this kind of, almost, for a moment it seems like that Diana is actually kind of given in to Orion's charms and plants a big old kiss on him, and Orion's even like, what the hell is happening right now? And this is nice for probably a second or two, and then all of a sudden Diana grabs a hold of Orion's stars and starts to, and basically says, look, you better start respecting me, or you're going to lose these. And this does not wear well with Orion, who storms out after his face has gone all, I mean, it almost looks like it's just a drawing of like an angered expression that looks bad, but no, something has actually happened to his face, and it starts to almost resemble almost an apocalyptic face. And that was like, to me, that was like, ooh, that's interesting. But just, we have, just all of this, kind of godly intrigue mixed in with, with these, with these great character beats, and, this is kind of a, it's kind of a beginning to a new arc here, but, it's a very strong beginning. And, there's been some noise around the internet about, kind of making Diana kind of, a literal kind of ball buster. I don't really see a problem with that. Maybe it's just me, but I don't know, from my kind of pseudo-male feminist point of view, I do see that as kind of a strong way for her to go, to exert her influence, even if it is kind of in, I don't know why that's really a problem. But whatever, some people are going to see things one way, some people are going to see it another. But I thought this was, again, another really terrific issue for Azzarello and team, and 4 out of 5 solidly for Wonder Woman number 19. Now on to Batwoman number 19. Now it's basically this issue, family plays very heavily here. CHES visits her sister. We get a little bit more of her kind of being more of a three-dimensional character. She discusses kind of her past. Her past seems to be mired in the fact that it seems like that their father was maybe a costumed hero at one point or another, that ended up in a very bad way. We have Jacob and Catherine continuing to argue about the fate of their children, whether kind of, literal children or kind of almost adoptive children, such as Bet has become. We have Kate and Maggie trying to work through some of their own domestic troubles from when, Batwoman actually injected Maggie with some of Scarecrow's fear toxin. And of course, this is having not a great effect on Maggie, and certainly doesn't seem to be helping their relationship any. But she's still willing to go along with it. And then, of course, we have this fight scene with Batwoman and formerly Flamebird, now Firehawk, or Hawkfire, excuse me. And they are, after this fight, they are looking to split ways because Batwoman is seeing Batman as someone who is too much of a control freak for his family. And she, while obviously not included in Death of the Family, is still technically part of the Bat family of books. And, what we seem to be heading towards is an inevitable confrontation between B-Woman and B-Man. So they seem to part ways because Bet's just not sure that she can follow Kate down this path. And then, of course, we have the return of, the reveal. Basically, Director Bones talking to Batwoman, saying, I'm going to lock your family up. Your father's going to go to prison, and unless you help me take down Batman, unless you help me find out who it is behind the cowl. And she keeps saying no, and then of course they trot out. They trot out the sister. They trot out Beth, or I don't know if she was the one that was going by Mad Alice. I can't. That rings a bell for me, but. We had the revelation of that in number 18. Now, okay, so we have Trevor McCarthy back on art. I don't know if you noticed while I was talking about this issue, kind of how dispassionate my voice was. That was very intentional because that's how I feel about this book. This book was a major slog to get through. It was like, and this unfortunately is what I foresee being a very big problem with me continuing to read this book, because as much as as tiring as the book could be to read, because J.H. Williams and W. Hayden Blackman are not bad writers, they're just not really good writers. And as interesting as some of the stuff that they do is concerned, it gets tiring to read through, to be perfectly honest. And it feels like it's just, and the fact that J.H. Williams isn't doing art, which is basically the reason that I kept coming back to this series, even though some issues were definitely weak. It seemed that this was just, now that Trevor McCarthy, who does this page, which just looks you know, this battle page where they're fighting this villain called Shard, who's going after DEO agents on behalf of the religion of crime. Just like, you know, I mean, the page looks, it's such a fucking mess. I mean, you know, I appreciate what he's trying to do. He's trying to look like Williams, but it doesn't work. You cannot. Only Williams can do Williams. And everybody who has basically been on this title, whether it's Amy Reeder or Trevor McCarthy, they always seem to ape that style, and they always fail. So while the dynamics of the book are kind of interesting, they're only given like the bare minimum of face time. And that's very problematic. And that's something that this book has always suffered from, is from a myriad of different character points of view, different goings on, and it's hard to maintain focus. This was a huge problem in the second arc of this book. And, you know, I barely made it through that. But once we kind of got to World's Finest, I was back on board. It's like, okay, this is a strong arc, with the exception of the final issue, which I thought was not very good. And it's just, you know, I mean, this book just made me tired more than anything. And not in like, oh, that was so good, I'm exhausted from reading it. No, this was like the comic book equivalent of Ambien. It was just like putting me to sleep the whole time. So this was, at best, a 2.5 out of 5. I didn't care for it, really, almost at all. Like I said, there's some interesting stuff going on here, but not nearly enough to really keep me interested for very much longer if they keep going in this direction. So now on to the picks of the week. First one that we're going to talk about here is The Shadow Year 1, number 2. Basically, the Shadow kind of officially beginning his career in the Big Apple as he saves Margot from an untimely demise from the flunkies of Mazzaretti. And you know, he is not quite the Shadow, because he's had to wrap basically a tablecloth around his face. Of course, he still has the girasol and the gloves, and he has the twin 45s, and, you know, the guys, of course, think they've got the drop on him because there's 2 of them, only 1 of him, right? Well, whoosh, gone. Where did he go? Bang, 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 bang. And the 2 villains are relatively easily dispatched. And even one of them says, you know, please have mercy, as he's hanging, bleeding, off of the rooftop, as he's actually holding on to Margot, and the Shadow is holding on to Margot as well on the other arm, and the Shadow just answers back, you deserve none. And he, you know, slips and falls to his death. Yes. And here we get the first appearance of Inspector Cardona, Inspector Joseph Cardona, who always kind of ends up being a pain in Commissioner Weston's ass. You know, very, you know, I'm not quite sure of Cardona's appearance a whole lot in the pulps. I'm assuming that he originated there, but definitely was a major player in the Shadow Strikes, because this would be the cop that the Shadow would always contact. Now, Commissioner Weston appeared in the pulps, definitely a big part of the radio show, because, you know, Lamont Cranston, amateur detective, you know, amateur criminologist, was his kind of nom de guerre in the radio show. And basically, you know, we have Allard, you know, because this has all happened outside of the Cobalt Club, right? And we have Allard inside with Commissioner Weston and some of the, you know, Allard as Cranston, back inside after he saved Margot and kind of put her to sleep because she seems to recognize him. And he uses the girasol to make her sleep. And so, Cranston, Allard's just playing Cranston up to the hilt of the kind of spoiled playboy, man who's kind of he has a vague interest in certain things, but they seem to kind of bore him very easily. And he gets some very unlikely advice as to how maybe, portents of basically what his eventual appearance will be, which is, of course, there's a one of these society women who is talking about them seeing the stage play of Dracula, and how just the black cloak with the the red interior and kind of the evening wear look and everything like that, just how it always kind of made her shiver every time, because he just seemed to appear out of thin air. And so, we have Maserati continuing to find, to rid himself of his gangland competition, because this is during Prohibition, and he's basically eliminating other bootleggers. And, this is all still being kind of overseen and kind of controlled through this unseen person who seems to be exerting their influence over Maserati. And we finish up the issue with our first glimpse of the Sanctum, the all-famous Sanctum. Now, interestingly, the Sanctum seems to very much... Now, we still have this reporter fellow following Cranston / Allard, and he always seems to lose him around this certain intersection in New York City, but, of course, the places that he keeps disappearing to are... The place he keeps disappearing to is the Sanctum. And it definitely has the look that was almost kind of established in the Shadow feature film with Alec Baldwin. And I thought that was a really interesting way to go, just to use some of those very similar visual cues. And, the book itself, as far as the storyteller is Margot. This whole book is told from her point of view, and from, we see the first time that she meets the Shadow, and, this is being told in a past tense, and how, her first encounter with him, and just seeing kind of the, extreme violence that he's capable of, and, him, her hearing his laugh for the first time, a laugh without mirth, like the laugh of the devil himself. And, we get a lot of really appropriately descriptive information from Margot about, how the Shadow, her master, feels about certain things that, are going on in the society around him. And, we get this awesome final page of him getting the traditional wear, the slouch brim hat, the red cloak, the twin holsters, and, just the scar, and just the laugh reverberating throughout the Sanctum as he gets his kind of battle gear on. And it's like, fuck yeah. After a somewhat stilted and scattered first issue, Wagner and Wilfredo Torres come out of this issue just guns blazing, literally and figuratively. It is actually more interesting to hear for the voice of this book to be Margot Lane as opposed to Kent Allard, because if we look at this from Allard's perspective, we lose a lot of the mystery that still surrounds the character of the Shadow. So that was something that every comic and every pulp incarnation of the Shadow has done extremely well, with the exception of the radio show, because the radio show still very much tells things very much from Lamont Cranston's point of view. But again, you know, there was never an indication in the radio show that Lamont Cranston was anybody other than Lamont Cranston, and that he traveled to the Orient, you know, and that's where he learned, you know, the hypnotic power to cloud men's minds so they cannot see him. So, you know, the first meeting of Cranston's friend and companion, the lovely Margot Lane, and, you know, their first real meeting as the Shadow and Margot Lane, and how eventually Margot will come to serve her master. Even though the book seems to this incarnation of the Shadow comic seems to very much want to put, you know, as opposed to like the O'Neill and Kaluta stuff, or any issues of Shadow Strikes, or, you know, any of the other issues, any of the other titles that bear the Shadow's name, it seems to very much want to put Margot and Margot and Allard almost on equal footing. That, you know, they are both almost equally capable, but ultimately, when the dirty deeds need to be done, it's going to come down to the Shadow. And of course, what Wagner is doing here is that, like Chris Robinson in Masks right now, he is capturing the voice of the Shadow and Lamont Cranston, as Allard plays him, perfectly. This is an awesome issue. It looks great. It reads great. It sounds great. This is the Shadow that I'm looking for. And it's sad that this is only going to be 8 issues in length, because I would love to see Wagner continue to write this character. So a 5 out of 5 for the Shadow Year 1, number 2. Also on to our runner-up for the week, another great pulp, The Black Beetle, No Way Out, number 3 of 4. Basically, of course, Francesco Francavilla's, basically his pulp, his kind of pulp amalgam book from Dark Horse, where basically we have Blue Beetle. He hops down to the Cocoa Club, and he's just basically going there to see how business is going since the demise of its owner and mob boss of Colt City, Joe Fierro, or one of the mob bosses. And he catches the eye of the very beautiful kind of torch song singer at the club, Ava. But after catching her eye, something else catches his eye, and that appears to be the recently deceased Fierro. So off he goes, after him, and of course he is confronted immediately by 3 huge goons. Well, they obviously have no idea who they're dealing with. Even if he's calling himself Ray Steves, he is not Ray Steves. And Black Beetle makes short work of them, although one of them does get a clock in and create something very revealing, both, again, literally and figuratively. And we get this little intermezzo where, after this really dynamic fight scene, we have what I'm assuming is Labrinto, who is kind of doing this chant, and there's a picture of Antonia Howard, and there are these snakes, and this, this statue, this idol of some sort, and it's all very creepy. And then we break from that intermezzo and get back to the story, and within the story, then we have Black Beetle going to the morgue, basically to confirm his suspicions that indeed Fierro is still alive, because when he examines the corpse, of course it's horribly disfigured, but when he takes a look at the hands, he sees this is, these are rough hands, these are someone that would definitely not be the hands of someone like Joe Fierro. So he goes back to his lair. He stocks up on all the weapons that he's going to need, and he starts driving towards his destiny and what would be the final confrontation, we're assuming, between him and Joe Fierro, and possibly also against Labyrintho. Francesco Francavilla again has my vote with this issue, that he should just about be writing and drawing pretty much every pulp that's out there, because the character of Black Beetle, of course, is such a wonderful, again, amalgam of any number of different pulp characters. Obviously, the Shadow is very much a heavy influence here, because, as he introduces himself to the lovely Ava as Ray Steves, he even, in his internal monologue, we see that he is lying. This is not who he really is. He has some other identity. And when he gets into the fight, like they said, this one of them does get a good solid clock in, and it tears away part of a mask that he's wearing over his face. And so so there is something even stranger behind Black Beetle going on here, and that's, these identities that he's creating for himself, are any of them truly him? And of course, there's only technically 3 issues of a full comic, and then you have the kind of 3-parter that existed in the Pages of Dark Horse Presents when the Black Beetle was originally introduced in what is available as a 0 issue. I could only get it online, and still my fucking comic book store can't get this title for whatever reason, but they've promised to get me the, if they fail on getting the individual issues, they will be getting me the trades. I'm still buying them, through the Dark Horse app and reading them on my tablet and then reading them on my computer, because the art is just so fucking gorgeous. Francavilla, he's awesome, man. He's so awesome. And, again, Francavilla, he is just, he is really, even the intermezzo that does occur does nothing to halt the momentum of this issue, showing again that not only is Francavilla a brilliant and wonderful and amazing artist, he's actually a very, very gifted storyteller, very, very gifted writer. And I'm hoping to see a lot more of his stuff as a writer and as an artist. If we can do both, if he can pull double duty, I'll be fucking pleased as punch, because he is awesome right now. Black Beetle is definitely a book that you should all be getting. Even if you're not that interested in pulp characters, this is still such a solidly drawn, solidly written book. It is really a wonder to behold, to have an original pulp character that, again, plays to some of the standards, but also plays very individually. It's very unique. It's wonderful. An absolute 5 out of 5, again, for Black Beetle No Way Out, number 3. And this, of course, brings us to the pick of the week. And when I first read it, I said, yeah, this is probably going to be pick of the week, because it was actually the first issue of anything that I read this week. And that was and is Daredevil number 25. So basically we have Matt, who is meeting, he's, confronted again by the man who seemed to escape the clutches of whoever the mastermind of all of this, blinding people using the same radioactive material to replicate Matt Murdock's abilities, and he looks to basically bring him to somewhere where he can confront whoever is behind all of this. And, Matt, leaves Foggy's bedside, tells Foggy to, stay rested, because he's got a date with trying to find out whoever is behind all of this. And of course, once he gets his, the kind of turncoat there, he realizes that the reason that he could never tell if he's lying or if he's telling the truth in regards to whether or not this is a trap is because he has a pacemaker. And it's controlling his heart rhythm, so he cannot tell if he's lying. And unfortunately for our turncoat, the pacemaker has been sabotaged. And it stops his heart and kills him. And this leads, of course, squarely into the trap set for Daredevil as he, falls through this glass, of course, into this empty warehouse. And, he is using all of his senses to determine who or what is there. And this being steps out of the shadows, and of course it's all shadows to Matt. But he, hears a very steady heartbeat. He hears a very, steady rhythm of walking. He smells a very familiar shaving cream, and he feels and smells his father's silks. Basically, his silk fighting robe, his boxing robe. And we are introduced to Ikari, Japanese translation of Ikari, meaning fury. And Ikari is a complete bastardization of Matt's original outfit. You have the traditional yellow, black, and red, but instead of the DD in the center here, you have the Chinese, the Japanese character for, I'm assuming, for Fury, his name, Ikari, and instead of wielding two billy clubs, he has two of, and I didn't write it down, but these two bladed, kind of almost, those martial arts, like kind of, not hook swords, those are different, but you know what I'm talking. If you read the issue, you know what I'm talking about. So most of you better have read the issue. And basically we have this, aside from the psychological mind fucks, Ikari seems to have every advantage that Matt does, with the exception of experience. He does have the heightened senses. He can, he has the radar sense. Matt knows this. And so what Matt does best is to try and get his, someone who believes that they're on completely equal footing with him, basically to get him out into the open where they're assaulted by more sensory input. And there is a nice flashback here to basically his training by stick. And we see some nice moments here as, some of the first blows are thrown, and Ikari does definitely seem to have the upper hand initially. And, but then Daredevil seems to get the upper hand back, and blows upon blows are traded. And, it seems like it's very much a stalemate until Matt gets himself into a sporting goods store that is fortunately empty because it's late at night. And, both of them are wounded. They have experienced, wounds, although Matt's seem to be more severe. He's, concussed, possibly. He, his ribs seem to be either bruised or maybe a couple of them broken. It hurts not to breathe. It hurts to breathe. And he sets off the sprinkler system inside. And, and again, he kind of thanks the stars, thanks God, whatever, that no one's ever thought to use this on him before. Because he's relying on Ikari's inexperience. Then there is a huge reveal about Ikari, not his identity, but another ability that he has that Matt does not. And this, of course, leads to his defeat. Matt is trounced badly. Although Ikari does not kill him and has no desire to kill him at this point, and leaves Daredevil to kind of go back and lick his wounds, because he never knows, because basically Ikari tells him, you will never know how we will come for you and how we will make you die. It could be today, it could be tomorrow, it could be any day, but one day they will come for him and they will kill him. And so we have a man without fear who is maybe learning to become afraid again. I mean, this issue just, from beginning to end, blew me away. This is kind of a masterclass of comic book creation. It's so brilliant. Wade does these beats so incredibly well, but the real star here is Eisner Award nominee Chris Samnee, and deservedly fucking so. It was funny because I was watching Ghost Critic's review of this book, and how originally he at first was not a fan of Samnee's work. Obviously coming off of, artists like Paulo Rivera and Marcos Martin, it would be kind of hard to kind of pick up the slack, especially with someone like Samnee, whose style had not really been tested in this venue yet. But I always really, really enjoyed Samnee's work, but it has never been better than it has been in Daredevil, and with maybe the exception of also including Rocketeer Cargo of Doom. This is an absolute joy to read, no matter how kind of upsetting that this book is, because this is a very hard book to read, because, this is, because you feel that no matter what, Matt is going to find a way out of this. And, we are still very much, we're not in the, super noir world of, Bendis and Maleev and Brubaker and Lark. We are, David Mack. This is still very much Wade's world, which is why we have this super, colorful, hero villain fight. I'm hoping, honestly, that Ikari will maybe be a recurring character, although his shelf life might seem limited for right now. But I'm hoping that he joins Daredevil's Rogues Gallery, because Daredevil's Rogues Gallery is not thick, per se, but it is very, very well populated. Yeah, you have characters like Stiltman, but you also have the Owl, and you have Bullseye, and, you have, obviously, Elektra from time to time, and, you have Frank Castle, who obviously, is kind of made to pop up here and there. And, just, there are some very good villains that he does have. And Ikari could very easily become one of those in the, in the not too distant future. But again, all of this seems to be leading up to this revelation of who the big bad is. And that the issue, if you look at this book almost kind of like a magic trick, you have, the pledge, then you have, you have the pledge of, yes, Daredevil is going to fight Ikari. You have the turn of, the fight going on, and then you have the prestige of the big reveal of Ikari, which, if you say that you saw it coming, you're fucking lying, okay? You are fucking lying. Because nobody saw that coming. And, this Samney, again, his panel construction and how, it's just like around, there's just this one kind of like 5 or 6 panel construction around his face of him using his different senses. And, there's, here's a panel for smell, it's a different color, and here's a panel for taste, and it's a different color, and one for hearing, and it's a different color, and one for the radar sense. Again, all these things have different colors, and they have these super exaggerated sound effects that are going on, and, it's so brilliantly done that you just have to say, Jesus Christ, this guy is a major fucking talent. And, anyone who can say that Samney is not the right guy for Daredevil can blow it out their ass. I mean, I know that, like I said to, Mark, I know that you're not saying that anymore. You are definitely on Team Samney now. Good for you. Thank you for catching up. But, and yes, we know that there's a certain inevitability that Samney will eventually depart this title, and that, someone else will come in, maybe someone like Francesco Francavilla, or maybe Marcos Martin will return, which would be equally awesome as well. But it will be hard to see Chris Samney go, but we're not going to speculate about that right now, because right now Chris Samney is just, he is really grown into a master tradesman. I mean, this is visual storytelling pretty much at its best. I mean, there was, Frank, like I said, I mean, just talked about, Francavilla's Black Beetle. I mean, these are, and then of course, you have people like Aja on Hawkeye, you have people like Capullo on Batman, people like Gleason on Batman and Robin. These are, Sean Phillips on Fatale, Joe Eisma on Morning Glories. I mean, Eisma's a very different style, but I mean, these are kind of like, when you look at people who are working together and you have this sense of, this is the perfect marriage, Wade and Samney have definitely gotten long beyond perfect marriage. I know that, for me, a long time, like the biggest one for me was Fialkov and Sorrentino on iVampire. And, but of course, Sorrentino left, sadly, because, I mean, how much even better would that book still be on it? But anyway, I am going to kind of wrap this up here, because we're done. This is an absolute, this is like a 6 out of 5. Again, this is a perfect issue for this week. Another brilliant issue of Daredevil, number 25. I mean, it's just, again, a masterwork. This is an awesome issue. But I'm going to close this review of Daredevil by saying I'm going to throw out there who I think the big bad might be. And this is, again, this is wild speculation, but I kind of know who I would like it to be. And it's nobody that we've seen for a very, very long time. I would actually kind of like the big bad, just because of his encasement and everything like that. We don't know who it is. Is this somebody from... This must be somebody from Matt's past. So I'm kind of thinking, although, like I said, this is wild speculation, is more kind of me wishing that somehow the big bad ends up being the Fixer. All of you who know your Daredevil history, the man that set up, you know, basically the man who's responsible for killing Battling Jack Murdoch after he won the fight he was supposed to throw, and that, you know, young Matt, you know, eventually chased down and, you know, heard him have a heart attack and die. Did he really die? That would be a really, really fascinating twist. So that is who I'm not betting. I'm not going to be gambling on this or anything like that, but I think it would be very, very interesting. I want to hear your thoughts on what you on who you think the big bad might be, because it can't be someone that Wade just created out of thin air. This has got to be someone from Daredevil's past. And we're getting our double-sized, or our extra-sized issue next week. Whether or not it'll be double-sized, or next month, whether or not it'll be double-sized, I don't know. But all the same, I am really looking forward to that, because it's going to be awesome. So that is, as they say, is that for this week's New Comics, bitches! So, like the new shirts, yes, this is, got the tax return back, did some great shopping on Record Store Day, which turned out to be pretty much the definition of irony, because our cats, while my wife was messing around with, you know, listening to some of the vinyl that she bought, one of our cats actually swiped the needle, and basically it's gone. We have to replace it now, and of course the setup that we have back here is very singular. It's not a great, you know, like super duper record player, but it's good enough for listening to what we listen to. And so we have to special order this part. I was actually just thinking of chucking this whole fucking thing and just getting a new one. Might be easier and faster, certainly faster. But yeah, one of the things that I decided to do in with my tax refund was to, this is something that should be important to all of us, which was to make a donation to the CBLDF, which of course, as you all know, I'm sure, is the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. And these are the people that are fighting to keep, you know, comic books not from being from not being censored, from not, you know, for stupid, frivolous lawsuits that, you know, in some of these backwards ass fuck towns, you know, where they see a manga title and they think, well, this is obscene, it must be, you know, you're under arrest. I mean, this is shit that happens a lot in this country, and we don't hear about it much because this is, of course, a very, very small crime. But thanks to the CBLDF, a lot of these people are able to get, you know, good defense, and that's what it's all about. Not just, you know, not just preventing censorship, but also from keeping those who are being censored, to keep them unfettered, and to keep them working, and, you know, to keep the shops alive, because that is what is important. And this, of course, you know, it's a very cool Grendel shirt, designed, of course, and drawn by Matt Wagner. And, you know, donations, you get to donate to a great cause, and you get a really cool shirt. I think for my contest, might be doing another donation, but we'll see. I might just want this for myself, because one of the things they did just get restocked was they do have the first trade of Saga signed by Brian K. Vaughan, which I think is just $20. So for a $20 donation to the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, you can get a signed copy of the first Saga trade. It's not a bad deal, and I think I'm going to be cashing in on that one. So, but like I said, the contests, we're pretty much almost closed out here. I do need to read some more titles. I do need to say I have, like I said, I read Conan, thought it was pretty good. Got this week's, read through it. I'm not going to review it here because I just didn't think it was that great. And also another comic that I chose not to review here because I didn't read it, and I'm sure that you're probably wondering about, is Wolverine and the X-Men, because it's a tie-in to Age of Ultron. It is not being written by Jason Aaron. I can't remember who did in fact write it. Oh, it was Matt Kindt, I believe. But that just didn't do anything for me to see, Matt Kindt on this. I know that he does mine MGMT, and obviously did, but I didn't really care for his kind of final run on Frankenstein Agent of Shade. It was okay, but it wasn't nearly as good as Lemire's. It just, and Paco Medina doing the art, again, I was not interested in reading another Age of Ultron, where I felt that the writer had no business writing that title. I mean, I picked, I read through the Superior Spider-Man one because that was Christos Gage who wrote that, and that to me, sounded an alarm that yes, this is a dude that obviously has written Spider-Man before, or at least has co-written him, and really knows the character. So, and that was a really solid issue. So, Conan the Barbarian, just not too keen on that. I'd like to kind of go back and see some of the Brian Wood and Becky Cloonan stuff, but this particular issue of Conan, just again very sleepy. I didn't really know what the hell was going on. It was very, 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 very verbose in regards to its in regards to its narration, and that just got really like, oh my god. And so I don't think, and I'm sorry, Ben, but I know this is the one that you chose, but I don't think that will be the one. Someone else out there, and again, I forget who it is, recommended Mars Attacks. I know that issue, I think 9 came out this last week. I did not pick it up. I will try and pick it up and look through it and see, because I know that John Layman is writing it. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of John Layman because I'm not even reading his detective run, and that's one of my favorite characters. And I like Chew. I don't love it, but it's not something that I feel that I need to continue to spend my hard-earned money on. So anyway, but I'll still check it out regardless. So when I do, I'll let you know. But until then, again, I know that I said I was going to wrap this up 10 minutes ago, but, that's me. Always on top of things. Always finding a new subject to talk about to take up more of your valuable time. Again, so we are going to close this edition of New Comics, bitches! And thank you again so much for watching. If you're listening to this on iTunes, thank you again so much for listening. Always a pleasure to, to talk at you and talk with you. Here is my next idea. I would like to gather with maybe someone who is across the pond, who can maybe do a Google Hangout one of these nights, because I know that obviously it's daytime for you, it's nighttime for me, the wife's in bed, I don't have to worry about, because we only, this is our entertainment, sanctum, I mean, the the computer's down here, the TV's down here, the Blu-ray's down here, the PlayStation's down here, the Xbox is down here, everything's down here. This is where all the entertainment in the house happens. And so it's hard for me to say, well, honey, go to your room, go to the bedroom for 2 hours or an hour or whatever and just do whatever when she's home, because, she works different hours than I do. And which is why the only time that I can do this is at night. So I'm going to go now. And so, but, comments, criticisms, complaints, ideas about Daredevil. Want to hear them. So let me know. I'm very excited to hear any... I'm always excited to get feedback. Love the feedback. Love our interplay. We need more of it. Thank you again for listening. Thank you for watching. If this is your first time here, subscribe. Because if you liked this, then this is what you're going to be getting week after week. So again, thank you so much for watching and for listening. This is James Donnelly. You are now exiting the Shadow Gallery with the eternal reminder to always stay in the shadows.